Welcome to the podcast where together, every Monday, we explore hospitality in its very broadest sense. From culture and cooking, cocktails and coffee, nutrition and farming, politics and animal welfare, organic and sustainability, family and business, entrepreneurship, and much, much more. Come and learn with me, Mark Cribb, about where our food and our drink comes from, and the businesses and, more importantly, the human beings that thrive on where we decide to spend our time and our money. Sign up to our weekly newsletter at humansofhospitality.co.uk and hit subscribe on your podcast player of choice. Welcome to the show, and a very different style of episode this week. Rather than a detailed conversation with one awesome human of hospitality, we have 9 great humans, most of which have been previous guests on the podcast. And we have just one topic of conversation: why they are supporting the campaign for a Minister for Hospitality. This campaign was launched by Claire Bossy, but had been sat languishing at around 38,000 signatures on the government petition website. And to be debated in Parliament, 100,000 signatures were required. So Robin Hutson, CEO of Homegrown Hotels, organised a call last week with over 100 very well-connected hospitality professionals. And working with some of his graduate trainees, as well as some well-known faces of the hospitality sector, such as Tom Kerridge and Angela Hartnett, launched the Seat at the Table campaign. And it's been very successful. To show my support, I organised to interview a number of respected voices in the hospitality sector over Thursday and Friday of the same week, to try and help get over that 100,000 tipping point. So whilst we were recording this, signatories were going up around 10,000 per day, and then overnight on Friday into Saturday morning, I was excited to see another 20,000 names added, and the 100,000 mark has been passed. As I record this, we are approaching 140,000 signatures, which is excellent news. However, the campaign does go on, since the danger is that this is debated and a token gesture junior minister could be appointed. Historically, when there was a Minister for Tourism, the person in role would typically only last 8 months. We need a senior minister in a longer term post to make the most of the incredible opportunities the hospitality sector presents to this country. Whether it be the number of people employed in the sector, the number of people employed in the supporting sectors, the fast track career opportunities for young people, the number of apprenticeships that we offer, the fact that we are the backbone of the UK for business meetings, the fact that we nourish the nation on a daily basis, the fact that the nutrition of the food we provide can make the nation healthier or sicker, the environmental implications of where and how we source the food and drink we provide, the investment in rural communities often lacking other businesses, the happiness factor of providing weddings, anniversaries and more. I could go on, but in essence we are a huge, complicated, entwined industry for positivity that should be better respected and have a better seat at the table than it historically has had. We've proved as a sector that we have Britain's best interest at heart. Despite crippling restrictions, we've stood tall and fed and housed key workers during the pandemic. We've stepped in to ensure children and those facing poverty have been fed where people have fallen through the cracks of government support. Looking after people and the country is hardwired into our DNA, but we are a unique sector and have historically been undervalued. These 9 people that I talk with, who between them employ tens of thousands of people but represent an industry of millions, will give you their perspectives on why they want a better seat at the table. Whilst recognising the great work that Kate Nichols and UK hospitality have achieved, we'd like someone on the inside as well as the outside of government. I hope you'll enjoy hearing their perspectives, and I hope you will be motivated to visit the website seatathetable.org.uk, where you can find a link to the petition and support the other social media accounts around this campaign. I will also put up links to the petition and all of the people interviewed and their websites in the show notes at humansofhospitality.co.uk. Just type 118 into the search bar on that site and this episode, number 118, and its notes will appear. From all of us in the hospitality sector, thank you so much for your support. Cheers. Robin Hutson, thank you very much for joining me, or it feels like I'm joining you really, because I know you've been behind this campaign trying to get this petition for a Minister for Hospitality up to 100,000 votes. So, thank you on behalf of the industry for what you're doing. Can you just explain to people why are you doing this? Why are you getting behind this petition? And what do you think a Minister for Hospitality could do for us?
Yeah, hi, Mark. Sure. I mean, to be absolutely honest, I watched the petition start. It was started by Claire Bosey about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I think. And I was really dismayed that it hadn't got more traction more quickly, with 3 million employed in the sector, another 2 million dependent. And it was sort of faltering at around 40,000 people that had signed. And after banging on about it, I'm not much of a social media whiz, but I was banging on about it on Twitter, and nothing seemed to happen very much. So I thought I'd better try and do something a little more proactive about it.
Yeah, well done. So you got 100 odd people on a call. Well done. And as a result of that, and you've added, I think, something like approaching 15,000 signatures in the last 24 hours. But why is this important to you? What do you think a minister for hospitality could do for the industry? And was there a certain thing, I suppose, that triggered where you thought, look, enough is enough. We're not being listened to. We need a better seat at the table.
Yeah, I think that's certainly true. I mean, I guess I've long held the belief, to be honest, that we aren't well enough represented for an industry of our size. I mean, if you go to a Caribbean island, the second most important person in the government there, after the Prime Minister, is the Minister of Tourism. We too are on an island here, and increasingly so, as it would appear. And I just felt that we are bounced between various departments. Currently, for instance, pubs and restaurants are in one government department; they're in the business energy department, and hotels and tourism and venues are in the Department of Culture and Media. So it's unsurprising, really, that in amongst all that other activity, and I'm sure all of those industries have very good causes of their own to fight, that it's hardly surprising that sometimes we struggle for air. And I think what really sort of got me going this year was that whilst hospitality is tripping off every MP's lips all of a sudden, and we haven't heard any of them mention it before this year, um, the view in government of hospitality seems to be something to do with city centre pubs, whereas we all know that it has a great deal more depth and breadth than that. I don't think I've hardly heard the word hotels, for instance, mentioned, and certainly not wedding venues or anything else for that matter. So I think we're lacking joined up thinking. I don't think our voice is being heard sufficiently. We're the third largest employer as a sector in the country. And I think someone should be banging the drum right next to the Prime Minister.
Okay. And if you could sit down, let's say this petition works, and I guess that's not the end of it. It's then going to be debated, and we need to select somebody to be appointed. But if you were sat with that person, what sort of things would you be bringing to their attention to try and, I suppose, highlight some of the opportunities, and maybe not just pandemic related, but some of the opportunities for hospitality?
Well, I think there are some immediate issues. I mean, um, pandemic related. I mean, some of the rules and regulations and restrictions and tiers, and there have been some dreadful clangers dropped throughout the year, which really didn't need to happen. We've been restricted by rules that had very little effect on the health aspects of the pandemic, and yet have severely curtailed a lot of businesses throughout the year. So there's the way we have reacted to as an industry to the pandemic. I think has been very, very disjointed, and I really believe that if there was one person that had a cohesive and deep understanding of the sector, it would make a lot of difference. But specifically, going forward, I have long believed that VAT for the sector, given that it's the driver, the tourism dollar for UK PLC is considerable, and VAT is frankly out of kilter with our European colleagues. So typically in Europe, VAT for hospitality and tourism is around 10%. We're sitting there at 20%, completely disadvantages the sector when we're competing on an international stage. So that's one very, very simple suggestion that would make a massive difference. And I think, but above all, the sector needs to be recognised and have the status that it currently doesn't have. So it's very often seen as a bit of an also-ran industry. If Toyota were to open 1,000 worker factory in South Wales, that would make front page of the newspaper. I've created 1,000 jobs in the last year that are sustainable. In the last 10 years that are sustainable. And of course, there's no recognition at all. So, and I think this goes on. So it's an incredibly resourceful, entrepreneurial sector, and there is very, very little recognition for it.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think also often as well, it's full of SMEs. It employs young people. It is a very entrepreneurial sector. It's also where lots of business meetings happen and engagements are made, isn't it? So it's the backbone of so much that goes on in the country. I'm very conscious that you squeezed me in between a couple of other meetings. I've got to let you go. So look, just thank you so much. I'll speak to some peers in the industry and we'll hear their voice as well. Any final message you'd like to say to people? Presumably just please sign up.
Yeah, I think sign up. Let's just get the job done. I mean, apart from anything else, I don't want the industry to be seen as not being able to muster 100,000 signatures for this petition, which would be very, very sad. So I hope the current scheme that has been spearheaded by a couple of our young management trainees. I was trying to reach a younger audience with this particular part of the campaign, which is it's a social media campaign called Seat at the Table. And I'm hoping that we'll get to that 100,000 very quickly. Let's talk again when we get there.
Perfect. We'll do that and make sure we get the right person in post. Thank you so much, Robin. Appreciate your time.
All right. See you later. Bye.
Cheers. Simon Potts from The Alchemist, over 20 bars and restaurants open in the UK at the moment, sort of spread around the country. Thank you for joining me today. We've spoken previously, but I'm just really interested to know why are you supporting this petition, this campaign that's going on at the moment in the hospitality sector, calling for a sort of a better seat at the table and calling for a Minister for Hospitality. What's your reasons for backing this, please, Simon?
I think it's probably exactly the same as everyone else that you'll have spoken to as part of this program that you're putting together. I'm sure you've had these numbers, banded about, and we're seeing them in the press and in social media and supporting this campaign. But the sector, responsible broadly for 3 million jobs amongst a really important part of the country, the young people that make up the sector. Somewhere in the region of £130 billion in economic activity, the multiplier effect that the sector has, the interconnection it has with the kind of cultural aspects of towns and cities around the country, the people that come out of the sector, those who obviously have made strides and climbed the ranks of hospitality in its own right, but also who have come through our businesses and have gone on to forge very successful careers in lots of different disciplines and jobs around the country, having learned, really important characteristics and job traits in the work that we provide for them. So I think we need somebody to fight that cause. Genuinely at the table, we've had some brilliant results from the lobbying that UK Hospitality and the BBPA have been able to do, and we've achieved a lot. But I think having somebody who truly and really understands what hospitality is about, who is there forming policy and getting the power of our sector across to a group of people who are very far removed from it, it feels like at the moment, feels absolutely paramount and well overdue, frankly. So yeah, right behind the campaign, and really hope that we get seeing some good traction behind it now.
Yeah, amazing. Okay. So it felt in the early days that, maybe there was a better comprehension. Obviously, furlough kicked in those early days. There was some specific grant support around hospitality, but it felt like it dried up pretty quickly. And then a number of decisions were made. Was there a sort of straw that broke the camel's back where you went, oh my goodness, they really don't get it, where you thought, you know what, we do need a better voice? Were there any specifics, examples you can give?
I think the most obvious one is the most recent one, really, where we had our great leader stand up and, cry about how sort of disproportionate the burden was that had been placed on hospitality, and really feeling for us as a business. And then, without missing a beat, saying that we were being supported through that process with the incredibly generous grant of £1,000, which, given what we all know, particularly at this time of year, and how significant this trading month and period is for us, felt like the most kind of backhanded compliment of all time, really. I think that was probably the straw. But to be honest, we were well beyond that. I think it's pretty well established now that there's no good evidence, no factual reasons to have put us into quite the restrictions that we've been in. Quite the opposite now, really. It's sort of seen as a policy decision rather than anything evidentially based. I think when the mind has been put to it to give the government its due, they have come up with some very good schemes, and in the early stages they did support well. Furlough, we need to remember, it wasn't just about hospitality, but was being sort of broadly applied right the way across the economy, and has obviously been rebooted to be a bit more focused on our sector belatedly. But with the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, which has obviously been well covered as well, they showed an innate sort of understanding of supporting a particular part of the sector really well, and driving people into that traditionally quieter trading part of the week at a time when we really needed the message to be spread about how safe our venues were. I think it was an absolute home run, and for a lot of people it transformed P&Ls and balance sheets at a time that was pretty uncertain. And I think without that, a lot of us wouldn't be quite so not calm, but a little bit more sort of hopeful of navigating this very difficult winter, having had the support through that period. Obviously, that was coupled with a reduction in VAT on food and on soft drinks, which is great. But I think that at heart showed that there is a fundamental misunderstanding of what hospitality is about. It's not broad. It's not one-dimensional in the way that retail is, where everything operates in pretty much the same way. The hospitality sector, is incredibly diverse. And while restaurants and casual dining businesses were really well supported through that process, very little's been done for bars and pubs, nightclubs, those poor guys. I mean, we've read about Deltic this morning, about to appoint administrators. There has been nothing that's been done to support people who trade and operate, in alcohol and in wet-led businesses. And of course, pubs are what we're crying out for now. And this £1,000 grant that is supposed to save us has just been is a drop in the ocean. I still hope, heart of hearts, that there is some sense to come in the new year when we can sensibly trade these things again, that they will give some thought to how they can accelerate the recovery and growth of those kind of businesses. But fundamentally, having somebody who understands that, who is part of that decision-making process, not just lobbying for it, would be really, really valuable. I think the other thing that the government has fundamentally misunderstood about hospitality, and again, it's about that broad brush approach. Some of it, obviously, as we know, is a bit knockabout, as there is in any sector, and perhaps doesn't follow the rules to the nth degree. But the much greater part of it has done it extensively. I think particularly in that middle part of the sector, the private equity-backed engine room of hospitality, businesses that still have that entrepreneurial flair but are working hand in glove with very serious business enterprises who are blending that entrepreneurialism with commerciality, who are creating not just very safe and compliant businesses, but growing businesses as well, have been largely missed out in terms of the support. Obviously, I can speak from experience here. We've got a lot of city centre locations. Every single one of our venues is well above that £51,000 rateable threshold, so we weren't able to access some of those early grants, which were fairly significant. Worse than that, really, the door has been shut on the CBILS process, which was really supportive to a lot of smaller businesses initially. In fairness, that policy has been reviewed and has probably just about come in the nick of time for us to be able to access it at a time when we most need it. But I think not really having the sense of how broad and how much range there is in the sector, and how high the quality of people are in it, particularly at the middle to larger end of things, has been another misstep really from the government. And again, something that would really be helped by having that seat at the table.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, some good points there. Given the opportunity then to sit down with this person, I'm kind of conscious that, it's all well and good saying that we really need somebody now in a pandemic, and there may be some specific pandemic examples, but I guess, we're looking at this as a long-term situation. We want a long-term, better relationship with the government, with somebody who really gets our sector. Are there any kind of key things, if you were sat down with that new Minister for Hospitality, he's just sort of started, he or she's just started in the job, are there any key things that you would want to sort of bring to their attention and say, look, can you please look at these in our sector moving forwards?
Yeah, and I think some of this stuff perhaps is in train already. The well sort of first arguments around what is paid in business rates, disproportionate to so many of the e-commerce businesses that are growing and flourishing in the country. I think that needs addressing, and we are told consistently that is being looked at, but will it be looked at again in a very kind of broad sense, or will there be that nuance behind it? I think there's been a lot around the commercial relationship that exists between landlords and tenants, particularly around upward-only rents, and how we've ended up in quite an archaic system that doesn't necessarily fit the nature of how we operate in the current market. I think fundamentally we are now a nation of consumers, and how we sort of translate that consumption, not just from what we go out and buy, but how we live our lives a little bit more vicariously. I think the appointment's going to be so important when it comes, and let's assume it is a when, not an if. And I think really understanding what young people are getting out of hospitality, not just the people that work in it, but people that consume it at those sort of early stages. When you are becoming a person, you're having those formative experiences in more controlled environments, and being in a sweaty nightclub is really important in helping you sort of understand and empathise a little bit more at large with people. And those early experiences make you a more rounded individual as you get into middle life, and you're able to really start sort of influencing decisions. We've taken some steps on that journey through the Nights Are appointments in London and in Manchester, where we're well represented, I think, in that element of it, but making it credible and important, and being understood, connecting people back in government to what is really going to be the future of the country. I'm not sure I've articulated that brilliantly well, but I think that need to connect with the younger people's voice in hospitality, rather than just the very senior people who are running these businesses, who all of us hopefully doing a good job, but just making sure that we're getting some of that, what sometimes referred to as reverse mentoring, that the voice of people of a very young age, in their late teens and early 20s, who are really consuming, and who are going to go on and do exciting things in and outside of the sector, making sure that they've got a voice that's being heard as well. I think that's going to be quite interesting. Quite how we do that remains to be seen, but I think just making sure that there is access to all elements of hospitality when we get that ministry in place is going to be really valuable.
Simon, thank you so much for sparing the time just to dip in and have this quick conversation. Are there any other key points that you wanted to articulate, or are you happy?
No, I think that's pretty good. Yeah, looking forward to seeing how it comes out and hearing what everyone else has got to say. Perfect.
Okay, best of luck in navigating your way through, and Merry Christmas.
Thanks, and same to you, of course. Cheers.
Danny Pecorelli, MD of the Exclusive Collection, some incredible country houses. You're well known in hospitality. You've invested millions of pounds recently in our sector. You're a very positive voice for our sector. Can I just ask you, Danny, why are you supporting this sort of seat at the table and Minister for Hospitality position?
Because I thought after the summer that hospitality had got a bit more of a voice and was respected as an industry, but recent government announcements have made it blatantly clear that we're one of the scapegoats. And when you've, as a company, invested tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds in providing a COVID secure environment, following the rules to the letter, and then to get penalised and such blatant disregard for our industry, it's time to stand up and fight, really.
Well, there's some key decisions, like you say, in the early days, it looked like the industry was getting some support. Were there some key decisions? Was there a particular straw that broke the camel's back with some of the decisions that have been made more recently?
I think it's just lumping everything in. I mean, I drove through a city centre when the 10 o'clock curfew, the original 10 o'clock curfew came in, and we're respectfully asking people to go back to their bedrooms, to stop drinking. And I drove home one night at 10:15, drove through a city centre to see hundreds of people queuing outside an off licence, not socially distancing, not obeying the rules, the off licence generating all the revenue, and I'm making tough decisions about people and not being able to invest in full-time wages for them. And I just the rules, and there's so many more I could mention, but the rules are just so skewed against us. And I know we are one of the most COVID secure environments, and we follow the rules, but the ability for someone not to follow the rules in a different environment is just it's so frustrating, as you can probably tell from my voice.
I can, and I've spoken to others, they're chatting about the ridiculousness of a country hotel where, your guests are staying the night, they're going back to their bedrooms, they're coming back down the following morning for breakfast, and just the sheer stupidity, I suppose, of having to send them all off to bed at 10 o'clock. And clearly that's making the situation more risky because you're having to cram service for the same number of people into a smaller period. So, yeah, it just seems crazy. Do you think the government, just don't get it? Do you think they do get it but ignore it? Why do you think that? And is it because hospitality is just wrapped up in it? It's such a diverse industry, and we all get sort of lumped under the city centre pub, where in reality a country hotel is very different. What do you think the problem is?
I think they look at the weakest point, and the city centre pub or the student union. I mean, I'm not blaming the students, but a student union pub, I think they don't understand. They look at the lowest common denominator, and it's why we need a minister, because they don't understand the diversity, the sub-segments of our industry, and so they lump everyone together, and they've never really understood what we bring to the party and how we do it and how professional we are. They just have this global view of us as a low wage, low skilled, back to lowest common denominator, serve a pint and microwave food. It just isn't the case. The skill, the professionalism, the vast diversity of what we offer is just huge. And so that's why we need a voice, so someone to sit there and fight our corner and explain what we do, but I don't, interesting. I don't think it's just our industry. I don't think they understand many industries. They have these high level statements about, we love high tech, or we love the city, or whatever they do, but they don't really understand any industry specifically. But we need someone in government to explain what we do. We employ you've heard these numbers, I'm sure other people say, 3.2 million people, 5 million people are directly dependent on our industry. If you include the supply chain, that's 5 million people. It's not an insubstantial number. And the tax revenues we bring in, the tourists we bring in, it just, once again, you could keep going on and on the case, but
yeah, no, it's good. All right. Well, look, if you were sat with her, because I guess we've got the current situation, we've got the current pandemic, we obviously got Brexit, we've got these certain trigger points. But if we had a Minister of Hospitality, we'd be hoping that this was going to be a longer term relationship. If you were sat with that person in the first couple of months of their role, what other issues would you be wanting to bring to the table to say, look, can you look at this? Can you focus on this? Is there anything else in our sector that you think needs a longer term perspective?
Labour, Brexit, I mean, that's another train crash. Whole subject we won't get into. What was the letter that every company got recently? Prepare, plan, and implement. Prepare for what, plan for what, implement what. It's just, it's. But the lack of clarity on every major issue at the moment. If you're running a business, you're the government's basically blindfolding you and then sort of shoving you in a direction, then saying, right, you've got to turn now, but you've got no idea which way to turn.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, challenging times, Danny. Thank you so much for just adding your voice and your perspective. It's really appreciated. And best of luck with navigating the chaos. But I really appreciate you taking the time.
And thank you for getting behind the campaign. I really, really appreciate it, Mark.
It was a pleasure. Thanks, Danny. Juliane, Acting Managing Director of the Sustainable Restaurant Association, thank you so much for joining me today. I know you're standing in for Andrew, who's been on the podcast before for a little while. I just wanted to ask, basically, I'm just going around a few sort of key contacts, key voices in the industry, specifically to ask and have a chat about this idea for a Minister for Hospitality and the hospitality industry having a better seat at the table for the government. I know you guys are supportive of this. Can you just explain, what do you think and why are you supporting this petition and this initiative?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we at the SRA are very supportive of it, seeing that there's such an opportunity for somebody in government to actually look at a broader kind of vision for hospitality beyond just the economic recovery that is so necessary. So I think we see it as not only do we need somebody really standing up for the economic interests of our sector, which have just been absolutely decimated over the past year. I think the value that hospitality brings to the country is so essential and needs proper accountability and proper thinking about at a government level. But from the SRA's perspective, we see there to be such a broad opportunity to link what's going on in DEFRA, what's going on in terms of food policy, what's going on in terms of health, to all of that happening in hospitality.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, actually, and I'd forgotten, but Andrew and I did speak about this, I think, when we had a little catch-up in the pandemic, but it did feel like a little bit of a reset opportunity, and it does seem crazy, I suppose, that when you think of the biggest difference people can make at the moment, apart from now, obviously, there's a vaccine, but health and nutrition and food, the bigger picture of food is so important. I suppose particularly around that bigger picture environmental side. If there was a new Minister for Hospitality and you guys as the SRA had the opportunity to sit down and have a chat, what sort of things would you be bringing to their attention and things that you'd like to see changed or developed?
Yeah, I think you absolutely are right to kind of point that out. And I think, that connection is so essential for a green recovery. All these words that are being bandied around building back better and meeting kind of, carbon targets and a better future. And I think if food is not at the heart of that, we will absolutely not make all of those ambitions real. So we see that as a real opportunity. In terms of what we would be asking for, I think we want to see kind of progressive VAT relief. I think some of these economic levers that have been, experimented with during the pandemic, things like Eat Out to Help Out, have been, amazing at trying to get some confidence back into the industry. But I think long term, we need to be thinking about how are we rewarding businesses that are doing the right thing? How are we progressively, supporting VAT relief on sustainable restaurants, for example, or pushing that kind of more progressive economic policy that helps guide the industry towards better choices.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. It does seem like a unique opportunity. You sort of represent a decent number of, customers, operators, I suppose, within our sector. What's your experience of having that seat at the table? Presumably, sometimes you want to highlight these things to government. Do you have a route into government already, and how do you think a Minister for Hospitality might change that route?
Yeah, I think we so our membership is about 12,000 kind of kitchens across the UK, and I think quite a diverse membership of everybody from independents all the way up through classic groups and chains, and we've got kind of high end and street food and everybody all in this kind of same group where the commonality is their drive to be more progressive and to do the right thing. And at the minute, we very much represent their interests, but it's kind of disparate. So it's conversations at DEFRA, it's conversations at Bays, it's conversations, at Treasury, trying to influence decisions. But it would be so helpful were there to be one point of contact that was looking out for the interest of hospitality across all of those. joined up thinking. I don't think that we're probably the only sector that wants government to do a better job at joined up thinking. But it's going to be so essential for us to build the future that we want and to build an industry that is, healthier and more sustainable and more progressive on the back of such a difficult year. We need that joined up thinking, that systemic thinking for solutions across the piece.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And funny enough, I was chatting to, even on a local authority level, I was chatting to our local council last week, having exactly the same conversation, funny enough, saying, look, as a sort of entrepreneurial independent business, you end up having to go to licensing or to the EHL or to planning or to economy. And actually, you just want one person who just understands business. So yeah, I think absolutely having somebody, because hospitality is so diverse. Were there any particular examples of anything you've seen, I suppose, or any decisions that have been made, whether that's, sort of pandemic related or maybe more sustainability, environmentally, of late, where you've kind of gone, where it's really highlighted, I suppose, for a need, almost like the straw that broke the camel's back, where you go, oh my goodness, how is it possible that we do not have a more joined up approach or a more informed approach to this?
I mean, I do think that, using Eat Out to Help Out as an example, I think it was kind of a grand irony that the government released their new obesity strategy in the same week as launching Eat Out to Help Out. And you ended up with quite a lot of messaging around, 50% off burgers at the same time as saying, and encouraging people to do that and to eat out at the same time as launching an obesity strategy, telling people to eat less. So, I think those are the kinds of messages where it's overwhelmingly confusing for a citizen to wade that sort of a response from government. And that, had there been more joined up thinking, I think we're talking about, Brexit and food standards at the same time as trying to rebuild an industry. And you don't want to create the wrong incentives in one end and then have, policy levers on the other end and have those two things not match up. And that happens so often, I think, when it comes to kind of food, farming policy, and then hospitality as a sector full of people creating jobs and creating, revenue. So
yeah. Amazing. Perfect. No, that's really good. Really, really good points and well made. Are there any other burning issues or desires around this topic, Juliane, that you would like to explore?
No, I think, I think the biggest thing for us is just, I think this year has shown how important it is that hospitality has a voice as a sector. And I think it's brought to light for a lot of diners the, myriad of issues that hospitality's the intersection of, it's the intersection of people and wages, and a lot of these, very human stories around how hospitality staff have supported, children going hungry, for example, over school holidays, and just how important at a human level hospitality is. And then on the flip side, you have how important at an environmental level hospitality is. Our consumption is only increasing in terms of the amount of food we eat that's cooked out of home, and therefore, supply chain issues, all of these things are huge in terms of understanding our future. So giving hospitality that voice and really recognizing how important it is really matters to us.
Amazing. Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for being on the side of the industry so well and representing us so well and adding your voice to support for this campaign. Hugely appreciated. And we will get to have a proper catch up one day. Good luck. Running the SRA for the next 6 months. Hope it goes well.
Thank you. Speak soon.
Cheers.
Bye.
Sally Beck, thank you so much for joining me as well. Great to get your perspective and your voice. Hotelier of the Year from the Royal Lancaster in London. Can you just explain to people listening, please, this sort of issue around the industry backing this petition and wanting a Minister for Hospitality? Can I just ask, please, Sally, why are you supporting that initiative? Why do you think it's important?
I think it's vitally important. We're the third largest employer in the UK. We're a diverse and creative industry. And we need our own minister who understands us and is able then to table the case for hospitality with the government. We produce a huge amount of revenue to the government, and we need to be valued properly and appropriately. And I think currently we are undervalued, misunderstood, and therefore that means government doesn't actually use us properly and is at risk of damaging us, and with the mental health of the country too. So I think it's vitally important.
Yeah, what do you mean by that mental health of the country?
I think, we represent joy, fun, togetherness, family, units, business, etc. When we're closed, people can't function well, and I think if you don't keep areas of your hospitality section, industry open, it's a huge effect across the country. I think it's underestimated.
Was there a particular decision they made that made you think we need a better seat at the table?
It's quite a tough question, actually. I think furlough, amazing, thank God, great, lovely. I think when they started shutting us down, and I don't know whether it was the press or the government, but starting to say that hospitality is the cause of outbreaks, which is not looking at the data properly. And I think that to shut us down without good cause just shows a huge lack of understanding of the data. I also think that the timings, this toing and froing, bringing in flexi furlough, then finishing furlough, then coming up the job. I think the first job security system was just not workable at all for hospitality. And thankfully they brought in the furlough. But you could just see they're just thinking on the hoof. They're not actually doing it with considered thought. So yeah, I don't think there was one particular straw. But there was multiple areas where you could see that they weren't understanding the impact of their actions, either on hospitality or on the public, that's actually going to either slow the virus or control it better.
Yeah. Do you think it was just literally a lack of understanding? I suppose that's the point of having somebody, one point of contact is this ability to articulate what the problem is. Do you think it was a lack of understanding, or do you think they were aware and they just make questionable decisions?
I think that's a good question too. I think they would possibly be aware. I think Kate Nichols has done a cracking job in getting us heard across the table, but I bet she's not at all the meetings, and I'm not sure how well people can articulate for us if they're not in the industry. Having a Minister of Hospitality that is well briefed, that understands the depth and the breadth of our industry and the impact of it across the whole of the country, would be much better placed to argue effectively across government than what we currently have.
Okay. And given the opportunity, let's say that new post is created and somebody's in that role, and we're in the first month or so, if you got the opportunity to sit down with that new minister, are there any key things that you would want to bring to their attention for our industry, either pandemic related or maybe moving forwards, sort of some bigger picture stuff, some issues that you'd like to be on the table?
I think one of the issues now I'd like on the table, we're all passionate about apprenticeships and learning in our industry, and I think we're a great advocate for young people coming in. The current levy is 0.5 of our payroll. The amount of levy that I've been paying over the last couple of years is tremendous. Now, to actually use the levy, I have to have a level of people that I'm putting through apprenticeships. If you don't use your levy within 2 years, you lose it. I'd like them to extend that timeline, because otherwise I'm going to be losing more money to a government pot that I don't need to, where I actually need to use it to invest in training and apprenticeships for our young people that we need to entice back into our industry. So I would certainly like him to look at extending the timeline for the use of the levy.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've not heard that brought up before, but it makes absolute sense that we've in essence lost a full year of opportunity. It seems crazy with all the other extensions that we've had not to do that for at least 12 months.
Yeah, they're not addressing it. They're still taking the levy contribution from payroll at the moment.
Really?
And the chances of us being able to utilise it effectively is another penalising tax for us. You know, and I think it's relatively fledgling what they're trying to do, and we're trying to get momentum in apprentices into our industry. So I would certainly be asking him to talk to government about extending the use of those funds effectively to allow us to not lose that money.
Perfect. Well, that feels like a great example of something that's probably particularly specific around our industry. I guess is the fact that we've got very high payroll. It tends to be a significant percentage of our turnover. We employ a lot of young people, and that might be something that's missed when we're just sort of lost, I suppose, in the other government departments. Are there any other burning issues? Anything else you want to mention, Sally?
I mean, I think they need to also talk about getting us back on the map. I think Britain has been damaged in the communication and coordination across the management of the COVID pandemic. When I look at the world, I think us also exiting Brexit at the same time, it's really important that we have we're open for business, we're safe, we're creative, we want business back in the UK. And I think a coordinated approach to marketing that Britain is a great place to come and a great destination for people to come for business and pleasure will help us in the long term. This is going to be a long time recovering, and I think the Minister of Hospitality needs to get behind everything to advertise us to the international market to bring back our business.
Yeah, perfect. I think you're right, and I think you're correct. Brexit creates a unique opportunity to do that, and for something positive to come out of it would be really helpful. Look, Sally, thank you so much for sparing the time and just adding your support to this. Really appreciated, and obviously, we'll try and get more and more people to sign that petition and have a proper debate on this. But for now, thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Andrew Stembridge, Executive Director at Iconic Luxury Hotels. You have some beautiful hotels dotted around the country. You employ just under 1,000 people. You're a great voice for the hospitality industry. Can I just ask you, Andrew, why are you getting behind this campaign for a Minister for Hospitality and this seat at the table? Why do you think it's important?
I think it's not only it's important. Thank you, Mark, and good to speak to you again. I mean, it's more than important. I think it's absolutely vital, and I think in some respects, and I think it's easy to sort of look back, but it's just obvious. And I think for far too long, we've needed somebody that really represented us in government. And I think probably what's brought it to a head now is obviously I guess combination of COVID and Brexit, and that and I think actually in many respects I think also and I know you've interviewed Kate, but Kate Nichols at UK Hospitality, what she's done through COVID to actually bring hospitality to the forefront and to the forefront of people's minds, I think is actually quite remarkable. And so all of a sudden it's almost that sort of platform. It's almost like it's almost like a sort of trampoline for where we are now, where we find ourselves, and this idea that really we need to lobby to have somebody who and not just anybody. And I think that's the critical thing. This isn't just about finding somebody, a minister. This is about finding a minister who knows our business. And I think the other thing it's been quite clear that the time and time again the decisions the government made throughout COVID have been bad decisions. And although I wouldn't want to be in their shoes for 1 second, they have every turn they've made decisions which have kind of gone wrong, and other than probably setting up the furlough schemes in the first place, and that's the one thing that's gosh, it saved us all. but actually in terms of the curfews and the sort of the way the sort of lockdowns have impacted and the now the substantial meals and all of these things, they're nonsensical, really.
Mm. Yeah, you're right, and I think you're absolutely right there. It is key that it can't just be anybody. It can't just be a junior ministerial position. The last thing we want to do is make this harder and make it where Kate Nichols has to go through somebody who's not really interested. So I guess the first stage is to get this debated and get somebody appointed, and the second stage is to make sure it's the right person. But you talk then about some of the decisions being made, maybe demonstrate that the government don't really get it. Were there any sort of key things? Was there a straw that broke the camel's back where you went, look, this is now ridiculous? There's clearly a misunderstanding or something's not working?
Gosh, I mean, I think in some respects the year is a blur, and I think the one thing we've all got sort of COVID fatigue now. I think, and I think everybody who's running businesses, small or large, or employing 5 people or 5,000 people. I think everyone's sort of had to sort of I guess, follow the process, be part of the process, and try and navigate their way through the process. And I think, for me, all along the way, the biggest issue has been really the fact that the announcements that have been made are made to the general public at the same time that the industry gets to hear of them. And so I think every turn, we've had very, very short notice to make decisions. And we've been trying to answer questions from people that are phoning us who are probably as confused as we are. So I think that's been a sort of fundamental problem throughout. In terms of the straw that broke the camel's back, I mean, I think probably for me the idea of the tiers in the UK. Albeit, I think it's probably hard for the guys who were most affected up in the sort of the northeast. But that seemed to be the right thing. And I suppose I must admit, we've all got mixed opinions about Boris, but I think it was frustrating there that he seemed to, well, he backtracked from that, and he obviously sort of bowed to pressure, and then introduced a second lockdown, which actually, as someone who's been travelling up and down to London to open our new property, really when you're out and about and you're seeing what's happening, and the fact that they're encouraging people to still go to work if they need to, and they're encouraging schools and colleges or allowing them to stay open, and therefore it actually really didn't seem to sort of have the impact. And I suppose for us, the big thing will always be that the efforts we went to in the first place to make all of our businesses COVID secure, they kind of worked, and they were proven to work in terms of the stats. And I think that's where probably the wheels fell off, is where that maybe some of the the bars and sort of nightclubs and things, and that's where again but I think in terms of formal or informal dining and hotels and that part of the sector, where it was not easier, but it was possible to actually make sure that the rules were followed. And I think it's this blanket approach at every term. And I think whether that's a lack of understanding or a complete lack of understanding, or whether it's just their sort of inability to, or fear that people sort of almost recategorize what they're in, but it just doesn't. It doesn't make sense. And even things like the 10 p.m. curfew, that was all that did it completely. It just made more people be leaving restaurants and bars and things at the same time, which kind of defeats the purpose. So it's I think there's probably I think to answer your question, a bit of a long answer, but there's definitely lots of straws.
Yeah.
in that,
more of a big stick than a straw.
COVID soup, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Okay, well, look, finally, looking at the bigger picture, I suppose, not just the pandemic, not just recent decisions. We'd like to see our industry better represented for a long time ahead. We've got Brexit. We've clearly got some big changes being made to the sort of the national picture of where Britain sits. You've worked across all sorts of groups, I know, from Relais Chateau to sort of representing the industry in lots of forums. What would you say if you were sat down with that new Minister for Hospitality in the first couple of months? What sort of things would you want to say to them to make sure they're on the table, looking at how things pan out over the next couple of years?
I think probably the the number one on the list has to be people, because obviously, and anything we can do to, we over recent years, we've seen all our, be it schools or the colleges which are closing, or the colleges which don't have the funding, and just this, ours is our business is a people business. And before COVID, we had chronic situation where we just really couldn't find people, and that was compounded by the sort of looming Brexit. And I think what we have to do is get to a point where actually we have we can drive people through education into our industry. And so I think for me that has to be the number one priority, because we will come out of this. The markets will bounce back, and into the international business. So that's going to happen, and that's going to be inevitable. And probably said person's going to have to probably do a lot of helping out first in terms of poor businesses which are struggling. But I think in the sort of midterm, it has to be about people. And our ability to find people in the UK and help drive people in that direction.
Amazing. Perfect. Okay, good. Well, look, thank you so much for adding your voice and your perspective. I'm afraid we're out of time. Congratulations, by the way, on your recent opening of the Mayfair Townhouse. Looks absolutely stunning in London. And best of luck getting through the winter. But thanks for adding your support, Andrew. Really appreciate it.
Thank Mark. Thank you for supporting us as well. It's really great. Really appreciate it.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, Andrew. Robin Shepherd, President of Bespoke Hotels. Thank you so much for joining me today. You manage over 9,500 hotel rooms and over 8,000 staff. Can I just ask, why are you adding your support to this sort of petition, this campaign to get a dedicated Minister of Hospitality? Why are you adding your voice?
I don't feel our voice has been clear or singular in the past, and I think that has to change. The adversity of the COVID current situation is such that we need to be organised, measured and heard, and without a seat at the table, I just don't think we can achieve that. Conversely, I feel that Kate Nichols has done a splendid job representing our industry through UK hospitality, but that's knocking on the door from the outside. We desperately need someone on the inside listening and interpreting and representing our industry. The last part I would just like to mention is that in the past, there have been ministers for tourism, and the average shelf life for any one of them is 8 months. So as soon as they've got the hang of what they're doing, they move to another role. So I'm hoping that this will be seen as a permanent part of the new employment landscape, vital to the economy's recovery, and an area of such significance that it has usurped manufacturing as the greatest employer of key personnel in the UK.
Okay, brilliant. It's an interesting point, that, isn't it? That we don't want to make the situation worse by having a constantly kind of revolving minister, as you alluded to. All too often they don't last too long. So the first challenge is to actually get this debated, and then we need to find the right person. Are you optimistic, or is there anything you think we need to do as a sector to try and increase the chances of not only getting a minister, but actually having somebody competent in that post?
Best piece of advice I ever had from anybody saying what qualities you needed to get on in life was persistence. And I think let's just persist until we've got what we need, which is to have the post acknowledged, and then the quality of the person that fills that post we can deal with one step at a time. To start looking too far ahead and describing what key qualities we want, I think has to be secondary to gaining the right to have the employment.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. And are there any key decisions that you feel have been made, which have really demonstrated, I suppose, over the last few months, this sort of lack of understanding? Was there a sort of a straw that broke the camel's back where you said, look, we really need to approach this differently. This isn't making sense?
Well, I think the Help Out or Eat Out to Help Out campaign was a wonderfully well-intentioned campaign, and it spectacularly managed to get us another lockdown, because people assumed that by going out to well-managed and aired licensed premises, somehow that was spreading the pandemic, and quite the opposite. We were remarkably well behaved, very disciplined, and we spent a considerable amount of money in order to make our premises COVID safe. So someone understanding, hey, please don't use a catch-all to close the sector down again, because actually this particular part of our economy has traded very sensibly and in a very adult way. So I think that's one area I desperately want a stronger voice within Parliament to be able to state our case much more clearly. And it is that strength and integrity of that voice which is so important for us.
It does seem to have been an incredible frustration, the fact that, we invested all of that money in training, in PPE. I think we demonstrated how good a sector we could be. I think compared to certain other sectors where you weren't met at the door, there wasn't anti-back, there weren't one-way systems, there wasn't the same level of training. It felt like we should be held up as an example. The transmission rates, the data of the transmission rates sort of demonstrated that we were running effectively. It felt on one hand that we should be held up and sort of saying, look what hospitality can do, look what it's achieving. But actually the reality was we were used as a scapegoat. Do you think there's a reason why? Is it a lack of understanding, or are we just an easy sector to pick on? Is it because we're such a diverse sector? Have you got any feelings as to why we keep getting used?
I feel it's because we've never been seen as something worthy in the past. That's possibly our own inferiority complex as much as other people's genuine perception from the outside looking in, but time has passed. We have a respectable industry, quality of catering and hospitality that's as good as anywhere else in the world. I hate to use the term world beating because that's been misused by the headmaster of this country at the moment. And I'm just desperate for us to say we're organised, we're thorough, we're meticulous, we care. We can produce great hospitality. We produce fabulous food. Our industry is unrecognizable from where it was 50 years ago, even 20 years ago. You go out in Britain, excluding COVID periods, expecting to eat very well and be incredibly well looked after. That simply wasn't the case post the Second World War in the UK. We were the laughingstock. So to have had all that hard work aggregating over the decades to finally reach a point where we're such a significant employer, and then find we just don't have the clarity of voice and the backup to ensure that our particular strengths are acknowledged in Parliament is just tragic. And we must, it's an absolute, make that change.
Okay. Final question. If you look at the sort of the big picture of our sector, maybe not just sort of recent months, maybe not just recent pandemic, but you look at Britain wanting to stand sort of tall and proud post-Brexit, are there some key things, if you sat down with that new Minister of Hospitality in those first couple of months, are there some key things you'd want to bring to the table to say, look, these are the issues around our industry, around our sector that we'd really like to ensure are on the table and being discussed over the next year or two?
Well, it's a differentiation between a salary index and a perceived quality of employee, which has put an artificial barrier into our employment legislation. And we need to try and knock that down as soon as we can so that we can hire people from anywhere else over and above the UK. We're not going to overnight make hospitality the new employment driver. And we have historically lent very heavily in the most recent years on East European staff to populate our hospitality businesses, whether they're coffee shops, restaurants, bars, or hotels. And just to cut all those potential recruits out because we've inned ourselves out of the EU is something somehow we need to get around. And when the hiatus over Brexit finally settles down, getting transfer of staff organised again is crucial. But also, we need to tell the world we're open for business. The impact of COVID is one thing, but the additional impact across the globe of what people now perceive of Britain is that we're an unfriendly place that doesn't really want tourism. And tourism is such a vital driver to the economy. Look at the occupancy in London businesses. At the moment, it's like a ghost town, and we desperately need domestic and particularly international traffic to come back.
Okay, so it feels like a key time then now is, for multiple reasons, now is the opportunity to back that. Is there any other points, anything else you'd like to say, or just please sign the petition, let's have the debate and get on with it?
Sign the petition and keep going. Get exercised about this, get aerated, get not angry but purposeful. We need to demonstrate that we can just do this thing right now. So I urge everyone who's listening to this broadcast to cajole anybody they know to add their name to the list, so we comfortably sail past 100,000 as a minimum. And then we need to have regular shows of strength to demonstrate the unification that's just taken place within the last week or so regarding seat at the table. It's a wonderful achievement. Let's build on that and take ourselves much more seriously than we have done in the past.
Perfect. Thank you, Robin. That's a great summary. Look, best of luck moving forwards. I know you've got businesses in every possible tier in every region of the country. Difficult times. I wish you the very best of luck navigating your way through. But thank you for adding your support and your voice to this campaign.
Fears for tears. Very good. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thanks, Robin. Peter Ducker, Chief Executive at the Institute of Hospitality. Thank you for joining me. I know you're very supportive of this seat at the table, this sort of petition to try and get a Minister for Hospitality. I've seen it on your website. Can you just explain, please, Peter, why are you getting behind this? Why do you think it's important?
I'm getting behind it on behalf of the Institute and on behalf of our members. I've always felt that as an industry, we've been underrepresented in government and not understood. And we need a central point of contact. I mean, the challenges that our industry faces need to be championed in Parliament.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? That because it felt very much sort of in the early stages of the pandemic, I suppose, that we did feel like we were getting some support, particularly with some sort of interesting initiatives like Eat Out to Help Out. What do you think's changed? And was there a particular thing, I suppose, that you witnessed where you went, look, this isn't working, we need a better seat at the table?
I think the first thing that disappointed me was that 10 o'clock curfew thing, because I couldn't get that. And the impact of that, particularly on restaurants, where they had to roll back last orders to about 8:30, was massive. And it stopped them having the ability to turn tables in the evening. But I felt from the start that the view that the government has of hospitality is of pubs and restaurants, which are important, of course. I know there are thousands of businesses and many thousands of livelihoods, but it's only part of the scene. And it's always frustrated me that government doesn't get what hospitality is.
And so let's say this is successful, this campaign, and obviously it then depends on who becomes the Minister of Hospitality. We'd like somebody who really genuinely understands them. But if you were sat with that person, whether pandemic related or just maybe some of the bigger issues around our industry, what sort of things would you want to make sure were being discussed around that table?
First and foremost, I think when we're coming out of the pandemic, which please God is just around the next corner, we're going to need support through that as well, because some sectors of the business are long-term affected, because all the forecasts say that the last thing that's going to return is long-haul travel. So cities like London, Edinburgh, which depend heavily on international business, are going to be suffering longer than resort hotels that we in Britain like to go to ourselves. So, I think we're going to need support in that. I think we also, the one thing about the pandemic was it kind of pushed Brexit off the headlines for a while, but it's now back on, obviously. But I do think that the future staff shortages that we were worried about right up until Brexit kicked off hasn't gone away. And long term, I know there's a lot of unemployment at the moment, but the industry will recover. We're incredibly resilient. And when we do, those staff shortages and the challenges of working around the government's new immigration policies are going to be as big as ever. So that's something I think we really need to engage with government about, because they don't get our whole employment modelling. And the other thing is that because of other things the government's been doing, there is turmoil in the UK universities, and that's had an impact on the main impact that's had has been on vocational education. And specifically hospitality. So where are our next bright graduates going to come from?
Okay, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. What needs to change? I know we touched on this when you and I chatted in a bit more detail before, I suppose. But yeah, what needs to change to help out the university and the education sector?
Well, I think two things. First and foremost, I lament the loss of the old polytechnic system. I know I'm showing my age, but it worked. It was true vocational education to a higher level. We're not going to go back to that, but we have to recognise that there should be some universities that are technical universities, as they call them in Europe, where that they are there as vocational universities. So I think that's one thing. I think as an industry also, we're going to have to adopt our model and say, actually, do you know what? We all know that we can recruit graduates from other academic disciplines, and then we have to give them kind of a conversion, so that they understand what hospitality is about and understand about hospitality management and the vagaries and the variations that exist in our industry. So I think we've maybe got two things to do. First and foremost, to keep pressure on to get vocational higher education working, and resist all the cuts it's had. The second is to say, well, we've got to broaden our church, our approach to how we recruit graduates, how we develop graduates, and the shape of our graduate programs, because there's no doubt there is going to be a shortage in years to come once the industry recovers.
Okay, perfect. Well, look, thank you so much for putting the Institute of Hospitality and your personal name behind this campaign, Peter. Really appreciate it. I know the sector will appreciate it. And best of luck helping navigate through the rest of this chaos.
Well, thank you, Mark. And thank you for what you're doing to give publicity to this, because it's enormously important to the industry. So well done, you. And
thanks, Peter.
Hopefully we'll speak soon.
Gary Jones, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. You are the executive head chef of Le Manoir. You are also incredibly well known for having being a great voice of our sector. The number of phenomenal chefs that you, and in partnership with Raymond Blanc up there at Le Manoir, the number of people you've trained is absolutely phenomenal. So a big thank you for adding your voice to this campaign for a Minister for Hospitality. Can I just ask you, why are you supporting this? Why do you think this is important, Gary?
Well, I think you've seen the devastation and the impact that some of these regulations have had on our industry, and I think if you do operate any business within this sector, it's a lot of care, a lot of passion, a lot of commitment goes into it, and you're seeing a lot of people who are given an awful lot and getting devastated by this. So, I think it's important that we do have a voice in Parliament alongside. And rather than making decisions that will actually cripple businesses, we're making decisions that will assist, keep businesses going, keep businesses afloat, and keeping the millions of people that this industry employs and the wealth it generates, and the tax it brings into the country. In so many ways, it's so beneficial for the industry that we make good decisions that will allow businesses to continue, and not, crippling businesses is not what we should be doing at this moment in time. We've got to do it. But again, I understand also that there has to be stringent, very, very stringent procedures in place to keep everybody safe. That's the main thing. But you've got to have somebody who knows the industry inside out, who can advise Parliament on what will work for us and what won't. And that's so important.
I was fortunate enough to come up to Le Manoir and have a chat with you, not long after we'd reopened. And actually, the systems that you had in place, the sort of temperature checks at reception, there's a Q&A before I arrived where I needed to confirm, if I'd had any symptoms when I got there. Everybody was wearing masks. The evidence was that the transmission rate in hospitality businesses was incredibly low. It's sort of next thing to us, I think, was hospitals. I think we're really good at keeping customers safe. We're good at demonstrating that. It felt strange that we weren't being held up as an example of how other businesses should operate, and actually we've sort of been blamed and we've been shut down more. What was your thoughts on why why we weren't being held up as an example and why we were being blamed?
I think in most things it's in life it's a balance, and you've got some bad examples of things we saw on the news which shouldn't have happened in certain things, but those that are taking this thing very, very seriously, which is most of our colleagues within the industry, with all of the sectors. There are a few that let the side down in terms of having too many people in one place at a time, and that can't happen. We're in a different terrain as we have been previously, and we've got to make sure that we're looking after everybody. The guest has to feel safe, and we have again invested lots of time and effort and cash into protection, PPE, masks, gloves, sanitizers, all of those, the cleaning So there's lots gone into it. A lot of thought has gone into it. Lots of people have done everything they've been told to do, which is admirable, really. And I'm the same opinion of you. Why are we not? We'll point out those that have got it totally wrong, yes, and there are a few, but the majority of places are very safe to go, and I would say the vast majority of places are very safe to go. And you've got lots of people bending over backwards to make sure that everybody's safe. Guest, your team, and everybody in the environment is safe. That's important, and it's what we're certainly doing at the manoir. It's what we'll always be doing and taking care of everybody. But the majority of our industry is doing the same, and I can't understand it either. But it's devastating businesses. Lots of places are really finding the impact of this.
You're in a beautiful location. You're in the countryside. You've got guests. They're obviously staying with you with a period of time, but you're keeping them very safe. Were there any sort of key decisions that you saw the government making that really exasperated, where you thought that this just doesn't make sense, specifically in our area of the sector? Maybe, some key decisions that frustrated you.
Well, I think putting a time frame. You must be out of a restaurant by 10 o'clock or out of a pub by 10 o'clock. From our side of things, we're creating a tasting experience. So it accelerates that tasting experience, and it's not as comfortable to consume food at speed. It's a hospitality. You take your time, you sit down with a friend or a partner, and spend time together. And that it can't be, when you accelerate those things, you've got to cram in. It does push gaps between courses. And it could be slightly uncomfortable to have everybody out of the restaurant at a certain time. But it also, now, if you're coming out of the pub and everyone's coming out at 10 o'clock and you're in the city centre, then everyone's on the tube or on the buses or on the street at the same time. That didn't make any sense to me whatsoever. So that should have continued to be staggered, I would have said. But as long as all of the procedures were in place and you're keeping everybody safe, that makes sense. But from our point of view, it did accelerate the experience, which again makes it a little bit uncomfortable for those wanting that experience. But we've now that's changed over to 11 o'clock. That's a whole lot easier for us. It's a whole lot nicer.
And then you're involved in all sorts of things around the industry. I say you've worked in it for a long time. You've worked at a number of very high-profile locations. I know you work with Adopt a School and education and all sorts of stuff. So you're aware of the bigger picture, not just pandemic related, but the issues around our industry. So if you were sat down with this new Minister for Hospitality, looking ahead, I suppose, over the next couple of months, are there sort of a couple of issues, things that you're passionate about in the sector that you would like to make sure that are on the table and are being discussed for the future of our industry?
We've got to make the industry more attractive to the youngsters. Our businesses. As you know, I go into primary schools. We go into, we're getting people from a primary level. We take secondary school boys and girls, or we did before pandemic, should we say. We haven't since the pandemic to keep everybody safe. But we generally would take people from schools on work experience and select those people who are, happy in this industry. And you get into this and you get a bug for it, you get a passion for it, and you can make a fantastic livelihood from it. It is a brilliant, brilliant people industry. And as I say, it is all about people, whether it be guest or team member. If you can take and make this industry a little bit more attractive in terms of, less hours, shall we say, and that's what we've started to do here, where we've sacrificed revenue. We've closed lunches on Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays so we can rest the team. That is an incredible step, because we could sell lunch 3 times over. That's what we've done, and that whole decision is based on lowering the hours of the team to look after our guys. Yeah, so the working week isn't as long as it used to be. So we're doing an active role in that. So again, we need to make our industry more attractive for people to come into. It is fabulous, and that's what I would be saying. How do we make it more attractive to the youngsters?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I think we have an opportunity, and I think it is changing. But yeah, recognizing the professionalism of our industry, and all too often it was referred to as a sort of a sector that you did in between jobs, or a low pay, low skill kind of sector, and that's simply not the case anymore. I don't think, is it? So, are there any other burning issues, Gary, that you would like to raise? But if not, thank you so much for adding your voice and your support to this campaign.
Not really, nothing burning except look after each other, look after your guests, look after your team. And together we'll get through this, because we are strong. We're a strong industry. We built up a lot of resilience and strength over the years, and I hope the government going forward makes some good decisions so we can all get on with it and provide a great experience for our guests and our teams of the future. That would be my message. And a Merry Christmas to everybody.
Perfect, Gary. Thank you so much for staying so positive and so upbeat. And really, really appreciate your support. Thanks for taking the time.
All the very best now. Take care.
Right, there you have it. That's it. The wonderful 9 humans of hospitality. A big thank you to them for taking the time to share their perspectives. I hope you found it interesting. So the whole point is, please go to the website seatsathetable.org.uk. Please head over there, where you'll find a link through to the petition and to the social media accounts, and your support would be very much appreciated, and I think you'll agree it's a very worthy cause. I will be back next week. Every Monday morning, release a new episode on the Humans of Hospitality podcast. But actually, next week's will be the last for a little while. We're going to take a few weeks off over Christmas. I will be working, but most people are too busy to sit down and have a chat. But I've got some great guests booked in for the new year. So come back next Monday for the last episode of the year. And then we'll get back to it from sort of mid-January 2021 onwards. And let's hope that's a calmer year for hospitality, and we all have a great period of trade. Okay, thank you. Have a great week. Cheers.